Okay, so welcome everyone back to my channel, and today we'll be talking about trinucleotide repeats. Okay, so we'll be talking about trinucleotide repeats. There are a lot of them, but we'll only be focusing on the high yield topics. All right, so before talking about trinucleotide repeats, I will be dividing them into the ones that code and then the ones that do not code. Okay, so coding repeat expansions and non-coding repeat expansions. So it can be classified into, there is coding repeat expansion and non-coding repeat expansions. Okay, so what this basically means in simple terms is that the genetic disorders that have trinucleotide repeat in C, A and G are the coding repeat expansions, and the ones that do not are non-coding. You can remember it simply like that. Okay, and then the coding ones, we know that CAG, the kegs of beer, 4 kegs of beer. Then we have Huntington's disease. Second, we have very important spinal cerebellar disease, or Ataxia. And then we have spinal bulbar muscle atrophy, or SBMA, also known as Kennedy's disease. This will be helpful in remembering the mnemonic. Okay, and then all of these have CAG trinucleotide repeat. Okay, and the non-coding ones, you can remember the non-coding ones as this MF. Okay, you can take it however you like. This MF doesn't code. All right, so the MF means Myotonic Dystrophy, which is C, T and G. Then we have Friedreich's Ataxia, the GAA. You may remember this from our previous video, as well as the Huntington's disease. And then we have the Fragile X syndrome. Right? Okay, and which will code C, G and G. Okay, so here's the easy way to remember this. In case of Huntington's disease, as we already said in the previous video, it will code for CAG, right? There is trinucleotide expansion of CAG, which means there is 4 kegs of beer, therefore it is in chromosome number 4. Now the classical thing that you have to remember, they typically ask in your exams that Huntington disease will be associated with 1. chorea or athetosis, 2. dementia. If you hear any kind of trinucleotide repeat or genetic disorder associated with dementia as well as athetosis, keep Huntington's disease in mind. And the next high yield association of Huntington's disease is anticipation. I don't know if you have watched House or not, the TV program in which one of the characters does have Huntington syndrome, and in that condition there is a condition known as anticipation. And what anticipation means is basically that there is increased severity or early onset of the disease in the successive generation. Okay, and that means it is autosomal dominant. As a matter of fact, these two are autosomal dominant. Okay, only the SBMA or Kennedy's disease is X-linked recessive. So since it is autosomal dominant, all the successive generations will be affected, and the newer offspring will have either increased severity or earlier onset of disease, or both. So therefore they will have resentment. Okay, resentment, they will, because no one deserves to have any kind of diseases, right? So resentment, and the treatment is risperidone, resentment, risperidone. And another way you can remember the classical presentation for Huntington's syndrome is that the disease will occur earlier than your father or your dad. It will occur faster or earlier than your dad. So this is DAAD, because you know that you are going to have Huntington's syndrome. Since it is autosomal dominant, you will be depressed. There will be depression followed by aggression. Then there is athetosis, which is a slow snake-like writhing movements, typically of your finger, or they can be chorea. And then there is dementia. Okay, this is what you have to remember. And we know that Huntington syndrome is associated with chromosome number 4, that is hunting for 4 kegs of beer. 4, you can write kegs of beer. And remember, the prevalence of Huntington's disease is 4 out of, you can say 4 to 8 out of 100,000. Okay, and you also remember from the previous video that since it is CAG, basically means in case of Huntington's disease, the caudate will have decreased acetylcholine as well as GABA, right? Therefore, in brain imaging, you will have caudate atrophy. However, this is not diagnostic. So this is the high yield points associated with Huntington's disease. Now we'll move on to spinal cerebellar ataxia. This is an autosomal dominant condition, as we already said. It is an autosomal dominant, and you have to remember that is spinal, cerebellar, and ataxia. All right, so there will be progressive ataxia, another P, that is peripheral neuropathy. Is it finished? Nope. Peripheral neuropathy, and then there is pyramidal tract abnormality, and another one, that is pigmentosis. Pigmentosa, that is retinitis pigmentosa. So you have 4 P's associated with spinocerebellar ataxia. And remember, in CAG there is chromosome number 4 for Huntington's and 4 classical presentation for spinocerebellar ataxia. Now comes Kennedy's disease. And the interesting mnemonic for Kennedy's disease is Kennedy can't get ready. Okay, this is a bit of a dirty mnemonic. Kennedy can get ready, because in Kennedy's disease there is trinucleotide repeat of CAG, right? Can get ready. Okay, and what happens is there is androgen receptor gene mutation. So since there is androgen receptor gene mutation, then even if there is insufficient amount of androgens, they will be insensitive to it. Therefore, there is androgen insensitivity syndrome. Okay, and because there is androgen insensitivity syndrome, Kennedy will have erectile dysfunction, gynecomastia, and testicular atrophy. So you know what I mean by Kennedy can't get ready. Okay. Alright, so that's all for coding repeat expansions. Now for non-coding repeat expansions, we have myotonic dystrophy, right? In case of type 1, there is DMPK, and in case of type 2, we have CNBP. And this one is in chromosome number C, that is 3. In DMPK, we have chromosome number 19. And we know that myotonic dystrophy codes for C, T, and G, right? So CTG is basically its classical presentation, that is cataract, there is total hair loss, so they will need to wear toupee. Okay, so there is toupee, and there is gonadal atrophy. Alright, so this is for myotonic dystrophy. Now we have Friedreich's ataxia. So Friedreich's ataxia is a very high yield topic. Alright, so in case of Friedreich's ataxia, you have to remember that it is associated with chromosome number 9, and there is trinucleotide repeat of GAA, because in case of Friedreich's ataxia there is abnormality of gait, right? So there is GAAIT, abnormality of gait. And remember, in case of Friedreich's ataxia, there is a very simple mnemonic that Friedreich drives an automobile, so it is an autosomal condition, autosomal, right? But it is autosomal recessive. Why? Because in case of Friedreich's ataxia, remember that there are 9 frat brothers living together. There are 9 frat brothers. Okay, Friedreich lives with 9 frat brothers. None of them are dominant. Everyone gets along with each other, and they're non-dominant, right? So that is autosomal recessive. And why do they have frat brothers? Because it is associated with frataxin. Okay, and the frat brothers get along with each other very well, and they drink a lot, they stumble, they stagger, and they fall down. So they have staggering gait, and there is tendency to fall down. So since they have a tendency to fall down, classically the patient will be wheelchair bound. Okay, and since they are falling down a lot, they will develop hemato and pes cavus. Right? And another thing that you have to memorize is that Friedreich's ataxia, the patient will have kyphoscoliosis. Kyphoscoliosis. Okay, so the classical presentation will be a wheelchair-bound patient with kyphoscoliosis, and continuing the mnemonic, even if the frat brothers, the 9 frat brothers, they drink, they stumble around, they fall down, they have a sweet big heart. All right, sweet big heart means they have diabetes mellitus, and big heart means they have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is a common cause of death, unfortunately, for them. So this is all for Friedreich's ataxia. And now we have Fragile X disease, right? Or Fragile X syndrome. In case of Fragile X, everything is X large. There is X large. They will have large ear, large jaw, they will have long face, and they will have large testes, and they are also associated with mitral valve prolapse, and is associated with CGG, giant gonads. Okay, you can remember that Fragile X syndrome is associated with giant gonads. Okay, so these are the trinucleotide repeats and the ones who are coding as well as non-coding. Remember, the non-coding ones are this MF does not code. This MF doesn't code. That means myotonic dystrophy, Friedreich's ataxia, and Fragile X syndrome, whereas the HSS, that is Huntington syndrome, spinocerebellar ataxia, and spinobulbar muscle atrophy have coding repeat expansions. Another thing is Makaro-Joseph disease is also a kind of spinocerebellar ataxia. It is type 3. Sometimes they are asked, sometimes they are not, but just keep that in mind. Okay, so hope you have a good one. Like, share, subscribe, and keep watching.